the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the birthday of the Alter Rebbe. So I'm going to talk about the connection, being that this is a Moshiach class, so we're going to talk about the connection of Chai Elul to Moshiach. So today I found a very interesting passage in the Sefer Shem HaGdolim. Shem HaGdolim is a sefer written by the Chidah. It's basically an encyclopedia with gems and gems and gems of all the Gedolei Yisroel. So he has all the giants. I'm sorry if I'll translate some simple words into English. I do have it on YouTube, and a lot of people put comments, put the words in Yiddish and English. So I'm going to be, I'd like to satisfy that as well, so I'm going to do that. Okay, in his Mereches Aleph, which means from Aleph, he has a piece on Rebbe Lazar Baal HaRekeach. Rebbe Lazar Baal HaRekeach. The Baal HaRekeach was a very, very great medieval Kabbalist. I mentioned two weeks ago in the class how he was the Talmud of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, and that was the period of time in the 1200s, beginning of the 1300s. That's when the Rambam says a prediction that Nevuah is going to come back to the Jewish people. And we spoke about that at that time there was actually an explosion of heightened spirituality amongst, meaning people that had a godly connection. Literally, they referred to many of them as Nevi'im at that time, which was on a way far greater than what was seen for 1,000 years before that. So he talks about it, the Chidah over here, Rabbi Lazar Baal Sefer Rekeach. In his passage on him, he's talking about Kabbalah. He's talking about how come the Sefer, it's small little words over here. He has a long discussion on how come the Sefer HaZoyah was not revealed until 1,000 years after the Tanoim and Amoraim. It was revealed in the 1200s. When Sefer HaZoyah was revealed, the Rambam, that period of time. So why wasn't it revealed? He has a whole discussion over here. He explains that in the Zohar, he asks, there were many chumras that is not in Gemara. You don't find it in Talmud, you don't find it in Gemara, so many stringencies and so on and so forth. If this was important for the Jewish people to keep all these chumras and so on and so forth, why wasn't it revealed only 1,000 years later? So the Chidah wants to say that the first 1,000 years of exile was an extremely, extremely dark time of incredible gezedes v'hashmadas, which means persecutions and suffering that the Jewish people went through. It's connected to the idea that that the Golus was set to be at least 1,000 years. The Chidah actually goes into a whole discussion over here, very interesting, of was it possible for the Geula to come in the first 1,000 years? He questions the idea that there had to be at least 1,000 years of Golus. He questions it because Eliyahu Hanavi told Moshiach, Moshiach answered Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, I think it was, Yeshua ben Levi. He answered him, Emes HaKasi Amar, he said, Hayoim today. So his mashma that the Geula was able to come at an earlier period. So he explains that the Pashtus, it couldn't come. If all the Yidden would do tshuva, then they could make Mashiach come even earlier. That has to be. But this that we need some certain schusim or whatever it is to make it happen, and that you don't need all of the Jewish people with a powerful tshuva, that starts after 1,000 years. The Iker Zman HaGeula, he says, is after the first 1,000 years of exile. So he says, being that that first 1,000 years was a time of such immense persecutions and suffering, if Yidden would have had the Zohar as well, and then they would have been held to a higher standard because you have such revelation, and so there would have been a room for greater kitrug and chas v'shalom, which means greater accusations against them, and it would have intensified the suffering even more. So the Eibishter prevented that they shouldn't have this mystical things in the first 1,000 years till the second 1,000 years, which is till after the first 1,000 years. Not that he doesn't say the second 1,000 years because he wasn't expecting another 1,000 years, even though the Chidah was closer to the end of the second 1,000 years. But in any case, he says at that time, he says Gezedas Tachel V'Tat is an exception. That the Shoah, you got the Holocaust, and you got things that are like unspeakable. I think what he means is that it came more sporadically in the second 1,000 years in terms of the intensity of the suffering. In the first 1,000 years, it was non-stop. Yidden didn't have a nucha for a moment. It was non-stop of a barrage of tzaddas that was hitting them without an end. Second 1,000 years, things lightened up to a certain degree, even though the worst nightmares we had in that second 1,000 years over the last just short period of time. But in any case, that's the reason why he says Sefer HaZayah was not revealed, because it would have actually worsened the condition of the Jewish people had we had access to that and had higher expectations in Yidden's Hanhaga, a Pi Sisrei Torah according to the secrets, and therefore it didn't happen. But why is the Shem HaGdolim very interesting is that he's very clear that it was very unlike, and it's not only over here, it's actually brought in Abarbanel, I think, as well, and in other Svarim, that it was very, very unlikely for the Geula to come in the first 1,000 years. The Geula, it really belongs, because we know the Gemara divides already the time of the world into three parts. The Gemara says 2,000 years Tohu, chaos, 2,000 years Torah, 2,000 years Yemosha Mashiach. Now 2,000 years Yemosha Mashiach, right, is most of that obviously passed already. So so we know that it means that the Geula could happen in those 2,000 years. But in those 2,000 years itself, he explains that the first 1,000 was kamat not shaykh the Geula to happen. It belongs in the second 1,000 years. Now in the second 1,000 years itself, we know that the last of the Elef Hashishi corresponds to Friday in time, because it's already brought in Ramban in Sefer Bereshis, and it's brought in Abarbanel in Bereshis, and it's brought in Rabbeinu Bechaya. This is right up there in Chumash Mikras Gedolos. You don't have to look in some hidden places. They discuss the idea that just like there is a regular physical week in creation, corresponding to that there is a cosmic week in which all of history corresponds to whatever the Eibishter created during that time. So the first 1,000 years of history corresponds to the first day, so on and so forth. So over there it is already explained that the last 1,000 years is when man is created. Corresponds to Friday when man is created. The human being really personified. Moshiach Tzedkenu is the ultimate human being, and that's Adam Arishan. And Adam Arishan is the one who elevates all of creation. And he's the one who welcomes in Shabbos, which is Mizmar Shir Yom HaShabbos, which is going to be the utopian world in the Elef Hashvi in the 7th millennium. So the real Zman for Bias HaMashiach is on Friday. But in Friday itself, we know that the time the Eibishter created Adam Arishon was during the daytime, not during the nighttime. The nighttime of Friday, which means Thursday night, the Eibishter was creating animals. The Eibishter was creating the beasts. The human was created on Friday day. If the human was created on Friday day, which means Adam Arishon was created Friday day, we have to look at the 1,000 years and divide it in two, which is the sixth, which is from the year 5,500. From the year 5,500, because from 5,000 to 500 is 500 years. That's the nighttime of Thursday. 5,500 until the year 6,000, which we are now already past the half of that as well, is the Zman when Adam Arishon was created. So you see already, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that that's the Ikar Zman HaGeula. The main Zman HaGeula, he points, begins in the year 5,500. The year 55, he brings it over here. This is in Parshas Pinchas. I'm going to share with you where the Yisroel Chaim is. You can look it up. Parshas Pinchas. It's on the children of Yehuda. When it names the children of Yehuda, he gives a very fascinating Orach Chaim. The Alter Rebbe brings it, this Orach Chaim in Mamorei Admir Azakin. The Alter Rebbe brings this particular passage. So it's over here in Bnei Yehuda in Perek Chavav Pasuk Yotes. This whole discussion. So in the end, he says over here, after it passed 5,000 years, from the 6th millennium, we hope that this is the end of our Golus. And all promises will be fulfilled. And the Orach Chaim was living right before this. And he says, sparks of the Geula will start. At the beginning of the next 500 years. He doesn't say Mashiach will come. He seems to be talking about a process. He says it will start sparkling. Nitzutze Geula, sparks of the Geula will start sparkling at the year 5500. That turns out to the year 1740. So who was it? The Alter Rebbe brings this Orach Chaim. I don't have the wording of the Alter Rebbe yet. Maybe he brings it actually over here. Let me give you the exact wording. The Alter Rebbe brings, this is a very Geshmaka Sefer, by the way, an awesome Sefer. It's great what he, Kufa Vagiyula, written by Rabbi Meislish from Mexico. Fascinating Sefer, but For me, what's far more interesting is not so much, he puts together really step by step the entire process in his Sefer itself. But what's really fascinating is the footnotes. In the footnotes, he compiles everything, all the research one can possibly need to learn about Moshiach. It's really, you have to have the patience to actually start going through it. I have a bunch of svarim over here. This is not my own knowledge. I was picking from what he was putting over here in his footnotes. Mamish did the job. So over here, he brings, he brings what the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says this in Mamori Adman Azaken Parshiyas HaTorah, in Chelek Aleph Amid Tav Chof. The Alter Rebbe brings V'oilem edvarav, that this that arises from the Or HaChaim, Sham, Shascholis Nitzoytze HaGeula Hayim Mitchilas Tav Kuf, was in the beginning. The Or HaChaim is talking before that. So the Or HaChaim says it will be. It was mamish a few years away from the Or HaChaim. I was like when the Or HaChaim was nifter. Or HaChaim was nifter mamish around that time. So the Or HaChaim is saying, however, when it's Pirush, he says it will be in the next 500 years. The Alter Rebbe says it started mitchilas tov kuf le'elef ashishi al yedei, through who? Tzadikei kedoshei elyon. Through tzadikim kedoshei elyons, holy, meaning people that are holiness, with supernal holiness, shahaya b'aschalas tov kuf le'elef ashishi, who existed at the beginning of that 500-year period. Who is he referring to? It's clear who the Alter Rebbe is referring to. That was the burst of incredible godliness in this world with the birth of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was born in the year Taf Nun Ches, which means 42 years before the Haschalas 5,458. That's 42 years the Baal Shem Tov's birth before the year 5,500. Okay, the Baal Shem Tov is 42 years old at the time when we entered into that 500-year period. The Baal Shem Tov was a tzaddik nister for 36 years. The Baal Shem Tov's his galos was on the day of his birthday. On Chai Elul, on the 18th of Elul, the Baal Shem Tov was born 323 years ago. It's going to be the anniversary on Thursday, the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, 323rd birthday of the Baal Shem Tov. 36 years later, on Chai Elul, his Rebbe, Achi Asheloini, forced the Baal Shem Tov to reveal himself. The Baal Shem Tov was fighting tooth and nail, not just like Moshe Rabbeinu. The Baal Shem Tov was putting up a fight not to have to be Megala himself as a revealed tzaddik. He revealed himself on Chai Elul, like the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe says that on Chai Elul, Tov Tzaddik Dalit is the Glickliche Tag, is the great wondrous day. The day is such joy that the Baal Shem Tov had. The Baal Shem Tov is kicking. The Baal Shem Tov is mortified that he has to reveal himself. But the Friedrich Rebbe says this is the Glickliche Tag, the most joyous day. Mareinu Baal Shem Tov was revealed on that day. So that's actually 7 years before, or 6 years before, from 36 to 42, 6 years before the beginning of this time. So the Baal Shem Tov's, this period of 5,500 is mamish, ground zero, 6 years before the Baal Shem Tov. This is the seeds of Hasidus, or this is the birth of Hasidus, happens at that time. And then you had tzaddikim like the Baal Shem Tov and the Mizritcha Magid, and all the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, which are just, they were extraordinary. Miyamais Nevi'im, we didn't see people that had such God, getliche koiches. That's the thing. That getliche koiches, ruach hakodesh, nevuah, moifsim, that are completely outside. On the Baal Shem Tov it says mekademoinem loy haisa kamayu. There wasn't, and it's clear, and it says in many svarim that the inyan of the Baal Shem Tov is the beginning of Moshiach. That's what it is. We know the Baal Shem Tov's meeting with Moshiach, which he himself writes in a letter that he met. He went into the Heichal Moshiach and he asked Moshiach, when are you coming? And he said, when your Torah will spread across the entire world. In addition to that, it says in many from the Pri Tzaddik, Reb Tzaddik HaKohen from Lublin, brings clearly that from the Baal Shem Tov on starts the nitzutzim of Nishmas Moshiach. It's not stam that it's Moshiach era, but these tzaddikim themselves, contained within themselves, the qualities of Malchus Beis David. But that we're going to leave Be'ez Hashem into next year. We're going to talk about the tzaddikim themselves and the role that they played. But now I want to focus more on the teachings of Hasidus as an introduction to the Geula, as an introduction to Moshiach. Why do we say that Hasidus is the prelude to the Geula? We find other very interesting things. We find, for instance, many events in which Hasidus reached a milestone, in which we reached a new age in Hasidus, corresponded with years and times when the Geula was meant to come. For instance, the famous story that in the year that they expected Moshiach to come, which is the year Taf Reish Ches, which was a year that there was a very strong Kabbalah that Moshiach was supposed to come that year. And the end is, what was it?
1848.
1848, the days of the Tzemach Tzedek. And and then the year passed, and everybody was very down because the Geula didn't come. And the Rebbe Marash went into the Tzemach Tzedek, and he asked him what happened with Moshiach. And the Tzemach Tzedek was very cool. And the Tzemach Tzedek, what do you mean? Moshiach came. Moshiach, he said, gedruckt the Likutei Torah. For the Tzemach Tzedek, that was perfectly fine. We printed the Likutei Torah. We printed the Alter Rebbe's Maayon, and that's what you want. Mashiach is here. Open Likutei Torah. You have Mashiach, right? And the Rebbe Marash had to say, that's in your Rebbe world, in the world that you're floating in. You don't need anything other than the Likutei Torah. But we outside, we are living in the Braisa, in the outside world, Bar, Bechutz, on the outside, we don't have Mashiach with Likutei Torah. But you see, and then the next major phase. Anybody that learns Hasidus Chabad knows that one of the greatest advances in the study of Hasidus, what we mean is that Hasidus becoming accessible in a way of understanding it and learning it in an unbelievable way that was never here before, started in the year 1906 in Tafrei Samach Vav. That's when the Rebbe Rashab said his famous mimer, Yom Tov Shel Rosh Hashanah. Taka begins with Rosh Hashanah, Tafrei Samach Vav. It spanned, I think, a year and a half or 2 years, not exactly sure how many, 3 years. Samach Vav Maimarim spanned 3 years, and then afterwards a Tafrei Ayin Beis. These are literally, it opens up the mind of someone learning Hasidus to a whole new level. Before that, you have little Maimarim. I don't mean little Maimarim, you have Zaftig Maimarim, but you don't have everything compiled together in a systematic way where you can go through the subject of Elokus, of Getlichkeit, in a clear way, nowhere close to what the Rebbe Rashab did. That's why the Rebbe Rashab was coined the Rambam of Hasidus. He's the organizer of Hasidus. He said it in a methodical way in which you can study and learn piece by piece, build the knowledge base, and so on and so forth. That year, Taf Reish Samach Vav, was in a year in which there was a tremendous hopes of the Jewish people. It was a case. It was a time for the Geula. And then you see that on that year, there was a major breakthrough in the revelation of Hasidus. So you see clearly that Hasidus and Moshiach are I'm not just going to say are connected by the hip. They are, as we're going to see today, they're actually one and the same Inyan. It's not just a segula. In other words, generally we think, okay, the Baal Shem Tov was told, when Hasidus will spread all over the world, this will enhance the coming of Mashiach. And it can be explained many ways. Hasidus is dynamite, Hasidus is power, Hasidus is fire, Hasidus ignites the soul. Hasidus is Pnimius HaTorah, it's the inner part of the Torah. So when a person needs to be shocked with something intense, with something really powerful that's going to really shake him up in a good way, in a holy way, in a positive way, so you need to zap him with something intense. So since the Geula is dependent in tshuva, that Yidden are going to do tshuva, so through Hasidus, we're going to be able to bring Yidden back to tshuva, like we see. Who are the ones who began? And now, Baruch Hashem, people are doing tshuva across the board, and everybody's Isaac. Everybody's involved in this project. Not just Hasidei Chabad. It is something that is universal today, to have a yeshiva for Baalei Tshuvas and to have kiruv programs and to have all kinds of things. But the ones who really were the initiators, and Hakol Moedim, but they should be Moedim, because it's just a fact, that was the Friediger Rebbe, and then the Rebbe with the unbelievable work. And it took 20 years later, 30 years later, people jumped on board. But the power, and even those that are taka bringing Yidden back to Yiddishkeit, have nashed from the energies of Hasidus, from the teachings of Hasidus, which has filtered its way into all the teachings of people that even don't see themselves as Hasidim, still have changed their way of thinking and have powerful Hasidic ideas which they use to help and draw people in to be. So we can say that's the reason, because you need people to do tshuva, and tshuva will only come. Now it's interesting. The Shloah HaKadosh. I'll share with you something very powerful from the Shloah. The Shloah HaKadosh brings over here. He brings it over here. Lashon from the Shloah. I found it to be a very interesting idea. The Shloah HaKadosh says, he's talking about the general idea why there has to be right before in the Zman HaAchrein, In other words, many of the great Mekubalim, many of the great mystics amongst the Jewish people address the question. We know what it says in the Gemara, that Devarim shel kivshonei shel olam. There are matters that are the hidden secrets. They have to remain hidden. You're not supposed to teach them. Ein darshan razi Torah. You're only allowed to give over razi Torah. The Rambam gives a bunch of razi Torah, means secrets of the Torah to only selected few, and only people that are really worthy for it, and it's only in secret, and it's only in private. You can't darshan barabim, ma'aser markav, and things like that. We know there was very many restrictions. The Gemara says the pasuk says devashu cholav tachas l'shonecha. What's it called again? Honey and milk has to be beneath your tongue. Honey and milk is the sweetness of the pnimius Torah. You just have to keep it as a secret. How can it be that now people are engaged in learning pnimius Torah, the inside of Torah, the neshama of Torah? So they all question. Now the Arizal says this already. The Arizal says that all the restrictions were only until his time. But once it arrived the time of the Arizal, actually Rabbi Avram Aziloi, he's a Baal Chesed Lavram, is a huge makubal. He was the grandfather of the Chidah. A great-grandfather. So he writes in the Sefer Chesed Lavram that the restrictions were till the year Shin. Hey Alafim Shin, which is 5,300. 5,300. That's 30 years before the Arizal. Or the Arizal, actually when the Arizal was born. The Arizal passed away already in Shin Lamed Gimel in the year 1573. So like 30 years before that, until that time, the restrictions were there. But after that time, there's no restrictions. So the Arizal himself says that in the later generations, it's mitzvah legalo izaysa chachma. It's a mitzvah to reveal the secrets of the Torah. And his student, Reb Chaim Vital, says very strong lashonos about how in the Rebbe Rashab brings it in Kuntris Eitz Chaim. He brings from the Hakdama for Shar Hakdamas. In my Sefer Shar Hakdamas, in the Kisvei Arizal that I have, is printed by the Ashlag people, I don't find the Hakdama or Shar Hakdamas. I was looking for it today, so I couldn't actually bring you the actual. But he brings it over here. The Rebbe Rashab in Eitz Chaim does bring it. He says as follows, these words, Ki al yedei tiskarev ha-geula, the geula will come only through learning the secrets of the Torah. Kiviyachol yishuyaseh l'shchina. Ki hakol, is the words of Reb Chaim Vital. Ki hakol tolu be'esek ha-chachma zois. Everything is dependent on the learning of Pnimius HaTorah, the secrets of the Torah. U'miniyasal is asikba. And those who are holding back to learn in it, who garemes icher ve'ikov binyan beis mikdashenu, causes a delay in the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Very sharp words. In other words, it's ma'akev the geula. The Shlach HaKadosh says something so amazing. He says, "Ubefrat b'doira achron," in the last generation, azeh. This is in the Shlach Maimar Rishon. He says, "Asher higid Eliyahu Anavi." Eliyahu revealed to us that the Zohar is going to be hidden until the last generation. I'm going to share with you that teaching from the Zohar. It's in Tikunei Zohar. It brings that Eliyahu Anavi came, and Eliyahu Anavi revealed that the Sefer HaZohar will be concealed and will only be revealed before Moshiach comes. And then when people will actually learn it, and with this they'll go out of Golus. With the secrets of Torah, okay. So, but he brings, the Shlach HaKadosh brings this idea. Ad Adoira Achron, until the last generation. V'oz Yizgala Chachmas HaZohar, then the secrets of the Zohar will be revealed. Kedei, listen to this. Shebizchuz zeh yigalu Yisroel, and this merit Yidden will be redeemed. Kishem and it's a very powerful comparison. Just like when we went on a Mitzrayim, we needed a certain schus. And what was the schus? Dam Pesach and Dam Milah. In other words, the Yid needed a special blood, which that blood gave them. And what was the blood? The blood of the Milah. They all had to circumcise, and also they offered the carbon Pesach. Those two blood was the schus, like Rashi brings in the name of Ramasya ben Charash, that the Yidden didn't have any mitzvahs. And the Eibishter says, "Va'at erim ve'erya," you're naked, you're not ready for the Geula. So that what? Dam Pesach and Dam Milah. These are the two mitzvahs that Yidden should have as chus. So he says, just like there, the Yidden, and that brought upon them a kedusha, a holiness, which made them worthy for the Geula. Kach, he says, "Hageula hasida lo yiyeh hageula." The Geula cannot be at sheyisku letoisvos hakedusha hazu. Only until they will merit to this added holiness, which comes through what? Through learning Pnimius HaTorah. As we have to learn Pnimius HaTorah, and only through learning Pnimius HaTorah, that adds holiness to the Jewish people, because it being that it's the inside of the Torah, dealing with godly subject, not with worldly halacha, deals with matters of the world. It's also holy. But it's not the same like Pnimius HaTorah, which the subject matter itself is pure godliness. So when we will learn that, we will have extra holiness, and that, V'hu ratzon hakel yizbarach, and this is the will of the Eibishter, V'ashrei hazoiche, and fortunate are those that merit to be in this, of those who are learning Pnimius HaTorah before the Geula, because it actually prepares them, it makes them holy. So this is a kind of a support to what I was saying before. It helps you to do tshuva, it prepares us for the Geula, but it's all more or less an inyan seguli. It's more like a segula that kind of will help in the preparations for the Geula. But there is something else, and obviously much deeper to that, and which tells us that the Hizgalus of the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, and afterwards the Alter Rebbe and Hasidus Chabad and so on and so forth, is not just a segula for Bias Mashiach, but he who Mashiach Atzmai. This is the whole Mashiach. What is Mashiach? Mashiach is the Yizgalus of Pnimius HaTorah. Let's understand it simple. When the Rambam, just from halacha perspective, when the Rambam talks about Yemoisa Mashiach, the Rambam says, what's going to happen when you're in the days of Mashiach? Life is going to be wonderful. Chocolates will grow on trees. Okay, once we're done with all the chocolates, because we'll all be grabbing those chocolates, we'll be eating a lot of the gluskois, of all the types of cakes and cookies that will grow. We'll be done with that because we'll have stomach aches already. Fartik. After that, what's going to happen? After that, what's going to happen? We're all going to start getting interested in the ultimate and the real commodity that's going to be available. And what's that? That's going to be the Dasas Hashem. Umala Aretz Deas Hashem. The world will be filled with divine knowledge. Where is the divine knowledge going to come from? Moshiach, the Rambam says Moshiach is going to be a Navi Gadol Karev L'Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshiach is going to be a teacher. The Rambam says it in Hilchos Tshuva clearly. Moshiach is Yilmad, he's going to teach the entire world. Goyim will come, the Rambam says, to hear from his wisdom, but definitely Moshiach will be the ultimate teacher. He will be Megala Pnimius HaTorah, and he will flood the world. Rashi says in Ashir Ashirim as well, that when Moshiach will come, that will be the time when Tam Mei Torah, Yishakenu and Shikas Piyu, we're going to merit the kiss from Hashem, when the kiss of Hashem is the revelation of Pnimius HaTorah. The secrets of Torah are going to be revealed. And the Rambam says that's the only reason any wise person waits for Mashiach. In other words, those who are superficial and kleinkepik, as you'll say, small-minded, want the Mashiach because then we'll get rid of our problems. But the Rambam is saying that wise people that have any deeper understanding, didn't want Mashiach for any other reason. Not that they should rule over the nations, and not that they should be popular, and not they should all have 318 servants, like it says, or things like that. That's not the idea. The idea is, all these things are necessary to allow for the proper state of tranquility, where there is no headaches, there's no worries, there's nothing to be burdened with, because a person will be free all day long to study, because your car, in today's days we understand that 313 servants doesn't necessarily have to mean people, because once you have Elon Musk's technology rolled out, and the car, I don't even have to tell it, you just have to think where you want to go, and the car knows exactly, it senses your thoughts, and it will take you in. So why people don't have to struggle with the need to answer texts while they're driving, chas v'sholom, and all these things, because we don't have to worry about any of that, because we're not going to have any need to do anything, because your refrigerator is going to be a smart refrigerator. It's going to know when the bottle of milk is close to empty. Call Google, send it to Google. Google will deliver it with a drone, and you'll have your groceries delivered by robots. And we're talking about 5 years from now. We're talking about without the incredible increase of Mashiach here. Just even up derech hateva, and 5 years from now, so many of the chores that we're going to be doing, we're not going to be doing anymore, because all this will be done through technology. But the main thing is, that's not why we want Mashiach. The main inyan of Mashiach is, it's going to be a time we're going to be able to know Hashem. Now, the knowing Hashem that's going to be at that time, which is the main idea of Bias HaMashiach, is not just because that's one of the perks that's going to be when Mashiach comes. According to Hasidus, what's the whole concept of Bias HaMashiach? Concept of Bias HaMashiach is that God, Hashem, is finally going to fully reveal himself in this world. That means he's finally going to fully permeate all of existence. The Eibishter is going to permeate all of existence. When godliness is going to permeate all of existence, means we're going to become super conscious of the Eibishter. We're not only going to become super conscious of God, we're going to become merged with Elokus. We'll become unified with Elokus. Now, who is that Negeya to? Who is that Negeya mostly to? Stones, yeah. Butterflies, yeah. Animals will have a higher consciousness, yeah. Plants will have a higher consciousness, but the supreme being in this world is the human being. The human being will be actually unified with Adam Elyon of Atzilus. That means that the supernal man above in Atzilus is going to find an expression through the human being below. We're all going to be not just human beings, we're all going to be facilitators of the divine. The human being will be completely merged with Getlichkeit. Our head will be a godly head. Our Chachma will be the Ebershter's Chachma. A conversion. The Rambam says that we're going to know the Ebershter. The Rambam puts a limit, Kefi Koyach Adam, according to the Koyach Adam, but we're going to know the Ebershter. And that is the Teuchen of Yemaisa Mashiach, is the unification of Hashem and us. That means every one of our emotions and every one of our features and every one of our powers of our soul is going to be completely converged with godliness. That's the state that's going to be when Mashiach comes. Now, okay, so the question is, what do we need a preparation state for that? Does that require a pre-period before Mashiach comes that we should start acclimating ourselves to the post-Mashiach state when we're going to be so filled with godly knowledge? So one can argue, maybe not. Was fell dice, you know what? So we know what it says. The Rebbe Rashab says that, when it comes to Shabbos, before Shabbos you do all your Shabbos preparations in the week. A Jewish home is always thinking about Shabbos. That's what Beishamai said already, that he used to already, from Sunday, used to look already out for something for Shabbos. But intense preparations for Shabbos start kind of on Wednesday. My wife starts shopping on Wednesday, and then Thursday things are there. But the preparations you kind of do on Wednesday and Thursday are more distant from Shabbos itself. It's not negayah to Shabbos itself. It's doing grocery shopping. It's starting to figure out who's going to be your guest on Shabbos, or if you need to eat somewhere, you're trying to figure out where you're going on Shabbos, trying to set your kind of setting of this and that. But on Erev Shabbos itself, the preparations become very much directly involved with Shabbos itself. You're showering for, especially after Chatzos, you're showering for Shabbos, and who doesn't grab a good piece of kugel? Levi knows where to get the best kugel on Erev Shabbos. And it's a big inyan. Toya meha chayim zachu. Toya meha, those who taste of Shabbos, it says chayim zachu. It's a big inyan. It says that our merit, you can be mahadar in this mitzvah. Chayim zachu, you're zeiche to life. So there is an inyan of te'ima before Shabbos, tasting the foods of Shabbos. Now, since the Shabbos foods are the godly revelation that's going to be when Mashiach comes, we have to taste that before that. You can say in the pre-Zman, before Mashiach's coming, we taste it. However, the Rebbe adds something very, very powerful in this Sikha. But in this Sikha, it's just a tiny little ha'ara. The main Sikha, I'm going to say what the Teichen of the Sikha is, but in Sefer his Vadas, over here is very Geschmack, the Rebbe says why we need this his galus of knowledge of the divine, which is the knowledge of which is going to be the main occupation after Mashiach. Why we need it before Mashiach. So first of all, the Rebbe says one of the most beautiful things I've seen in a sikha. Number 33. This isn't. No, I'm sorry. It's not in your sikha. You don't have it here. This sikha is taken from this Fabrengen. This is Zois Chanukah Tavshem Mem Vav. Lamed Gimel in Teres Menachem, page 242. The Rebbe says, now, I heard from the Rebbe once. I remember, I just came to Lubavitch then. It was a shocking statement. It was too much for me to even hear. It almost caused me a shviras hakelim, and I almost ran away and didn't come back. But the Rebbe said this, and I heard it on an audio, and I don't remember for when. The Rebbe said in these words, I remember even the tune the Rebbe saying it. Der was es heint von anash, oder der was es morgen von anash. Oder der was es übermorgen von Anash, weil soif kol soif wollen alle Jiden sein von Anash. Weil der alte Rebbe hat gesagt, dass Hasidus ist nicht für kein Muflaga, und der Rebbe der Schwer hat gesagt, dass heint ist gekommen der Zeit of that. So let me translate that. I heard from the Rebbe saying like this: those who are Hasidim today, or those who will be Hasidim tomorrow, or those who are going to be Hasidim the day after tomorrow, because in the very end, everybody will be a chassid. Why? The Rebbe says, the Rebbe is predicting, saying clearly, why? Because when the Alter Rebbe made Hasidus, or I didn't make Hasidus, when the Alter Rebbe brought Hasidus to the world, he said himself, he's not bringing this for a group. Hasidus is not supposed to become a group of Lubavitcher Hasidim. Hasidus is meant for all of the Jewish people. It's meant for the entire world. And the Rebbe says, my father almost said that today we came to the time when that is supposed to happen. We arrived to that time. So here the Rebbe says the same thing, but the Rebbe learns it from a Rambam. The Rebbe says that everybody's going to be a chassid. The Rebbe says that says in Rambam. Why? To every chassid. And this is included every yid. There's a psak din in Rambam that every yid is going to be a chassid. The Rebbe says a psak din in Rambam every. Why? Inyanai shel chasidhu. What's an inyan of a chasid? Shaloim mit Torahs hachasidus. That you learn Torahs hachasidus ba'ofen the yisparnesun, in a manner where you can actually absorb and understand the deeper meanings of Hasidus. You can integrate godliness in your mind. Havana v'asaga. B'chabad, that's basically the Rebbe is quoting a passage in the Zohar where the Eliyahu Navi says that in the end of days, the Jewish people will be zoicha not just to have the book of Zohar, but yisparnesun. What does yisparnesun mean? They're going to be nurtured by it. They're going to be fed. And it means it's going to be something you can understand. And that is not until Hasidus Chabad came along. The teachings of Kabbalah, you can learn Kabbalah from today till tomorrow. You can get the entire encyclopedia of Kabbalah. You can get the entire Kabbalah map and know all the things, but you don't understand the inner meanings of what these things mean until you actually learn it in Hasidus. In Hasidus Chabad, it brings it into an understanding that you really identify with it. So the Rebbe says, and the Rambam says, Sheba'oisa Hazman. And when Moshiach comes, Moshiach, Yekol Yisroel Chachamim Gedolim. That means all the Yidden will, and what Chachma? They're going to know every Ritva, they're going to know every Rajma, that too, but that's not the Inyam of the Rambam is talking, they will be Chachamim Gedolim. The Yoidim Dvarim Astumim, they will know the hidden things. The Yasigu Das Boiram, they will know the mind of the Creator. Kimol Arzei Hashem. And the Rebbe says, so Hareya Inyan the Yasigu Das Boidam, for a person to know the mind of his Creator, he who limud Torahs Hasidus. This is what Hasidus is. When there's a famous statement that I think, I don't know who, if you know who said it. They said that the early philosophers had a very hard time exploring God, and they had a certain ceiling. They had a certain cap. What did they say? They said that ultimately you can't know God. Why can't you know God? Because if you will know Him, you will be Him. And obviously you can't be God. So because you can't be Him, so you can't know Him. So therefore, understand your limitations. That was a statement, I think Reb Sadia Goyen says it, and some others bring this limitation. So I think the Friediger Rebbe is, I don't know where the root of the teaching is. So the Baal Shem Tov came along, and then the Alter Rebbe came along and said, so what? So know Him and be Him. Be Him. If you'll know Him to the way, what's knowing? Knowing is a manner of merging. Adam Yada Es Chava, you become one. So that's the whole purpose of creation, that we should become godly. So know Him and you'll be Him. And that's Moshiach. Now, the Yesh L'Hoisef. And now the Rebbe comes and he adds. This is so special. I'm just going to conclude with this. The Rebbe says, why does it have to happen before Mashiach comes? Good. When Mashiach will come, we'll all be Hasidim. We'll all know Samach Vav and Ayin Beis, plus the new Maimarim and the new Hasidus that's going to come through Melech HaMashiach. Right? But why do we have to know it now? So the Rebbe says very simple. The Rambam says, "Ein bein olam azeli yemoisa Mashiach ela shibud malchiyas bilvad." That the change that's going to happen when Mashiach comes is only very minimal. The only thing that's going to happen is we're not going to be under a foreign rulership. And one of the things the Rambam insists, there's not going to be a bittul minhagay shel olam. The world will not flip over in 1 minute. It won't be a change in the nature of the world. So the Rebbe asks a simple question. There won't be a change in the nature of the world? Suddenly everybody on the planet drops all the things that they're doing and starts pursuing knowledge of God? That's the biggest change in humanity that's possible. That's the entire world completely metamorphosizing. That everybody is Isaac. The Rambam doesn't even put it on Jews. The Rambam says everybody. Only to know the Eibishter. That's the biggest change possible. So, and the Rambam says it's not supposed to be that way. The world has to segue into the Geula without a total upheaval of what was in a new world. You don't have a bigger change than this. Only this Shibud Malchias. We have to say that this idea Yasigu Das Boiram is going to start before Mashiach comes. It's going to actually last for a few hundred years. There's from the Baal Shem Tov and onward, and then from the Alter Rebbe, we started learning Hasidus, and we started acclimating to the human mind should be able to understand godliness. And because of this, when we will enter into Mashiach, it will be more intense Hasidus, but it's not going to be completely new because we've already had it. And that's why it's not such a Shinoi Min Haggash Alaylam. That's amazing. And that's So it comes out, according to that, the Baal Shem Tov Hasidus, Alter Rebbe, Tanya Hasidus, it's not some segula, it's not some kind of a preparation for Moshiach. This is Moshiach. Moshiach is, the only difference is, now it's just people that are inspired that do it. When Moshiach comes, it's going to become everybody, and it's going to be everybody all the time. All the time we're going to be running around with Maimarim. All the time we're going to be obsessing with it, because we're not going to want anything else, because then we're really going to understand it, and then we're really going to appreciate it, and then we're going to be crazy about it after Mashiach comes, more and more and more, and we're going to soak it up, and the whole world is going to soak it up. So it comes out that Chai Elul, which is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, and the day the Baal Shem Tov was revealed, and the birthday of the Alter Rebbe, and so on and so forth, this is Mamish Hascholos B'Yas HaMashiach. If you think about it in a deep way, this is Mamish Hascholos Nitzah. This is Mashiach entering the world. So that's why someone sent me today that Elul is Rosh Tevis, Ala Litvaks Veren Lubavitches. So I thought it works really well, because that's going to be, the Baal Shem Tov started to make the Litvaks, Chassidim, and it continues. And Chai Elul is the Chai, and what's Elul? If you think about it, Chai Elul is Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi. We and the Eibishter become one. It's the marriage. To have a marriage, you have to have that intimacy, that oneness, and that is in Hasidus, when you know your wife or you know your husband very deeply. You know them in a very inner way. That knowledge, that's Hasidus. So Elul and Chai Elul, which means to enliven that relationship, to wake it up, to bring it into a living experience, that's the Baal Shem Tov, that's the Alter Rebbe, and that is Moshiach. Yeah. The Sikha, by the way, you should learn, this idea that Rebbe brings over here, he says it in Ha'ara, and one small Ha'ara. Over here it's a little longer, but over here, Ha'ara 29. You can take a look. There can't be such a transformation and you have a complete different world. From a world that has no knowledge of God, suddenly there is such a knowledge of everybody in pursuit of such knowledge. So the Rebbe says you have to say that these things start slowly. And we acclimate ourselves into a knowledge of the Eibishter, which happens in this mission.
So did you tell Shimoni for tomorrow night?
No, I need to tell him. That's true. That's another.